I always really wanted to try to get into G-Funk beats, but I never knew how to make them, until I decided to download IIInfinite's Essential Drum Kit, the demo one. I wanted to give it a shot, I wanted to see what it was like, and this is the first ever beat that I made right off of the drum kit. I've made another one that I thought to be way better than this one, but I wanted to show the versatility of this drum kit and how you just jump right into it and immediately start making G-Funk sounds. So this is my first ever G-Funk beat right off of that drum kit. There's a lot to break down with this beat, so let's just jump right into it. So if you've seen any of my other videos, you'll notice that this beat layout looks a little bit different than the past. The reason for that is because when I got the drum kit, I first started with the drums, which I never ever do. And the first thing that I did was I grabbed the break clap and I made the simplest sub clap patterns. Next thing that I did was I went to the hi-hats and I grabbed thoughts, and by ear with one little hi-hat at a time, I just came up with a little intricate pattern. This is what it sounds like. Next, I went to the kicks and I grabbed Enigma, and I created this very simple pattern based off around the hi-hats and the claps. This is what it sounds like. Once I got the basics down, I just went down the drum kit, just started adding more effects and other little instruments. And the very next thing that I did was I grabbed the white noise open hat and I placed it right here where it kind of has a little bit of emphasis right before the kick, so it's kind of like leading into the kick. Here's what that open hat sounds like. As I was listening to the drums at this point, I wanted a little bit more of an intricate clap pattern, but I did not want to use the claps, I wanted to use some snaps. So I went and I got the Fuji snaps from the drum kit, and I created an almost two-step pattern right after the clap, but it blends in very well with the kicks in this area along here as well. Here's what the snaps sound like. Next here we have the trigun snare, and this snare is doing something similar to the open hat patterns that we had here, and it's also kind of tying in with the snaps where it's adding a little bit more emphasis to the clap pattern so it doesn't sound as bland, but we're not reusing the claps all the time. This is what the snare sounds like. I find this snare goes really good with that clap. The next thing that I found in the kit were these DJ scratches, and I'm obsessed with them. I've tried to do DJ scratches in the past before, but none were as good as this one. They're actually very shitty. So I added them at the end just so they kind of build up into the drop. This is what they sound like. Then I found this triangle 2 in the effects, and I just listened to the drums where I felt like there was a little bit of emptiness, and I just added this little pattern. And as you can tell, the velocity was going down on it. And one of my favorite sounds that I love hearing in West Coast beats is that stomp. So I went into the effects and I found stomp 1, and I just added it to the beat where I felt necessary. This is what they sound like. And finally, I grabbed the stream cymbal and put it right at the beginning just to add a little bit more of a punch in the drop. I lowered some of the highs in the EQ and added a little bit of reverb so it feels a little bit more dragged. Here's what it sounds like. Altogether, this is what the drums sound like. Now moving on to the melody. I've never actually made a West Coast beat before, along with a West Coast melody. So the first thing I did was I grabbed these Rhodes from Arcade, and I created this chord progression, and I don't remember the thought process or how I really did it, but it's telling me right now that I'm long overdue for making a chord progression video, which I want to do soon. In the meantime, this is what that sounds like. I also really worked with the EQ on this one and added just a little bit of cymatics memory just to make it a little bit more wavier. Then I went back to the drum kit and I added the A synth bass and just created this simple pattern that's kind of just gradually going up. I also added some for the EQ just to really cut out some of the highs on it. Next I went into Arcade to try to find that classic high pitch lead that you always hear in West Coast beats, and I found this one here, Citrus Injection. It's one that I've used quite a bit in the past. I did a little bit of modifying to this one. I added some EQ to really cut out a lot of the high ends. Despite it being a high pitch lead, I didn't want it to be too overpowering. I added some cymatics memory because I wanted to have a bit of that wavy effect. Added some more EQ to pinpoint those frequencies that are standing out just a little bit too much and lowered them. And finally some Fruity Filter where I just lowered a little bit of the cutoff frequency. With all that, this is what it sounds like. The next thing I did was pretty simple. I went to my go-to smoothed out sub bass from Arcade. I simply copied the pattern of the synth bass, pasted it into the sub, stretched out certain notes, and just pitched it down a couple octaves. This is what that sounds like. And finally, as I was listening to the melody, I felt it just needed a little bit more ear candy, so I went into Tasty Jams and I found this Locking Eyes sample. I used this sample and this sample, and I just made them work together throughout the beat to make this. Once the whole beat was done, I went back to the kit and I just wanted to see if there was anything else I can add. I then went to the guitar accents and I found this glide guitar. I then put it right at the beginning of the melody. I then copied it over halfway through the melody, I cloned it, and I just pitched it down a little bit. So together this is what these two guitars sound like. I find they work really well together. Altogether, this is what the melody sounds like. Sparing the layout of the beat, I'm just gonna get right into the beat preview. This is my first ever West Coast beat that I officially made.